Let's learn about how to write great user stories. User stories refer to a format for writing product backlog items. They are an essential tool in Agile product development that helps teams capture user requirements concisely and effectively. In this tutorial, we will learn what are user stories, the importance of user stories, the standard format of a user story, the acceptance criteria of a user story, and the team's definition of done. User stories contain a brief, informal description of a feature or functionality from the perspective of the end user. They are written in a way that is easy to understand and prioritize. They also must be sized appropriately so that they may be completed in one iteration. Let's explore why user stories are important for your product development process. User stories provide a shared understanding among team members of what needs to be built and why. They serve as a communication tool that helps bridge the gap between stakeholders, product owners, and developers. User stories also allow for flexibility and adaptability in the development process, since they can be easily updated or reprioritized based on changing requirements or feedback. Because user stories are the main input into what the team needs to build, they must be written in a way that can be quickly understood. Let's learn the standard format that user stories follow. Here is the standard model for writing user stories. As A. Here you would add the user persona that will be using the feature, or the who. I want to. Here you would describe the desired functionality in a few words, or provide the what. So that. Here you would include the value of the functionality, or describe the why. This format helps teams capture the key elements of a user story in a concise format. It is important to clearly define the user to ensure that the story is focused on meeting their needs, so the who represents the user or stakeholder that will derive value from the feature or functionality being built. The what describes the actual value or functionality that the user wants to achieve. It should be specific and measurable, and clearly state what the user wants to accomplish. The why explains the purpose or benefit of building the feature or functionality. It should highlight the value that the user will gain from having this capability and how it will improve their experience or solve their problem. Let's see an example of a product backlog item using the user story format. As a registered user, I want to be able to reset my password so that I can regain access to my account if I forget my password. Notice how this sentence is able to convey who will use the feature, what is the feature, and why they need it. Now let's learn about the acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria are the conditions or requirements that must be met for a user story to be considered complete and successful. Acceptance criteria are unique to each user story. They are used to define the expected outcome or behavior of the feature or functionality being built. They also provide a way to objectively determine if the story has been fully implemented and tested. Acceptance criteria should be written in a way that can be answered with a yes or no on whether the criteria have been met or not. The main objective of the acceptance criteria is to help demonstrate that the intended value of the user story has been achieved. Let's look at an example of an acceptance criteria. The user should be able to click on the Forgot Password link on the login page. The user should receive a password reset email within 5 minutes of requesting a password reset. The user should be able to click on the email link and get to a page to create a new password. The user should be able to log in with the new password and regain access to their account. Let's explore the definition of done for a user story. The definition of done is a set of criteria that must be met for user stories to be considered complete and done. One main difference between the definition of done and the acceptance criteria is that the definition of done applies to all the user stories, while the acceptance criteria may be unique for each user story. The definition of done should include the necessary standards that must be met when building the product or service. This may include coding or building standards, testing standards, external regulatory standards, and cross-team standards, such as not passing incomplete work to other teams. The definition of done helps ensure that all aspects of the user story, including development, testing, and quality assurance, are completed to a high standard before considering the user story done. Let's look at an example of a team's definition of done. The code is reviewed and approved by at least one other team member. Automated tests are written and passing. Manual testing is performed to ensure that the feature works as expected. Documentation is updated to reflect the changes made. The feature is deployed to the staging environment for further testing, and the product owner has reviewed and approved the feature. It is important to note that these are examples and different teams may list different items depending on their needs. This concludes our training module on how to write great user stories. In this module, we covered what are user stories, why writing great user stories is important for effective Agile product development. You also learned that user stories provide a clear and concise way to capture user requirements, communicate among team members, and prioritize work. By following the standard user story format, which includes the who, what, and why, teams can ensure that user stories are clearly understood and aligned with user needs. Additionally, defining acceptance criteria helps teams objectively determine if a user story has been fully implemented, while the definition of done ensures that all aspects of the user story, including coding, testing, and documentation, are completed in accordance with quality standards. By using well-written user stories, acceptance criteria, and definitions of done, teams can improve their development process, increase collaboration, and deliver valuable features to users. So, let's keep these best practices in mind when writing user stories to ensure that our Agile development process is effective and user-focused.